I worked for a trading company in Dubai that basically sourced, it was a procurement shop for oil companies and oil service companies. From there on in, I moved into selling industrial chemicals. So I'd literally just doorstep companies, cold call, did all the coalface sales training you can imagine, walking around with my samples kit in my bag, and essentially selling equivalents of WD-40 and degreasers and stuff like that. And that led me into the heavy equipment world, into crane world. And in actual fact, the first company that I ever doorstepped was a company called McDermott International, who's a big offshore marine contractor. And this was back in the day where you had a couple of security guards on the main gate getting into their yard in Jebel Ali. And I managed to get in. I met this bigger than life Texan that sat there and said, "Hey boy, what you got?" And I got out my WD-40 spray and showed him everything and walked out my first sample order. That started my relationship with that company, which was a fantastic relationship. I would then go on to become their exclusive crane broker for a period of about 6 years. I had a big pile of surplus crane boom that belonged to a Manitowoc crane, or Manitowoc Cranes, and they wanted me to help try and sell it. So I found a buyer in the States, a company called F&M Mafco, and actually ended up brokering my first deal. I acted I earned a buying commission from Mafco in that instance. That's how I got into the space. Well, as I just said, it was really by accident. I was selling industrial chemicals all over the place, and when you walk into these yards, you know, the industrial chemicals, the WD-40 sprays, the degreasers, all this sort of stuff, they're being used in preventative maintenance programs on heavy equipment. So you're in the space by default. So that's really how I ended up there. And it was by accident. It was being asked one day, take a look at this crane boom. What I looked at was just, I thought was a bunch of junk, scrap metal. Turns out it wasn't. It had a market value of something like $400,000. In that case, I acted purely as a buyer for Mafco, and got a buyer's commission for that. So that was the happy accident that took me into the space. So, I still don't get tired of watching huge crawler cranes do big lifts, or bulldozers just clearing tons and tons of earth on a mine site and stuff like that. It's an exciting industry to be in. I would say that the one lesson that I've personally learned is to always, and it sounds like an empty cliche, but it really isn't, and that's always listen to the customer. Or sometimes it's listening to what they're not telling you. If they like the product and then they're not engaging, why aren't they engaging? And so that forces you to be really, really self-critical, and to keep going back and examining your solution and looking for the bit that you've missed that the customer is not giving you feedback or is not saying something. So it's really re-examining everything you do, being very, very self-critical, being your own worst self-critic. It forces you into uncomfortable places because you passionately believe in something. You're absolutely convinced this is the best thing that the industry needs, but yet no one then engages. So you have to go back and you have to take a hard look at what you're doing and be honest with yourself and say, we might have made a wrong turn there, or this needs changing, or whatever. So being self-critical is probably the biggest lesson I've learned. The thing that I hear the most is how time consuming they are. And that's with regards, irrelevant what methods they're using, whether it's a clipboard or an existing app. The process itself can be very challenging. If you're doing an inspection on an iPhone or a tablet, and you're in a yard with glaring sunlight and heat and dust and all the rest of it, that process in itself is very challenging. The teams out there doing these things, they'll take a clipboard, they'll fill in their inspection template on a clipboard, and then they'll go back to their hotel room or back to their office, and then they will start to upload all their information into their systems, into the app that they use, and that takes a lot of time. When I used to inspect cranes, for example, I would take a clipboard and I would have a digital camera or a phone, maybe right in the last days of what I was doing. And you would take your pictures and then you would say, okay, this is machine number 1 and picture 1 to 10 belongs with machine number 1. And then you'd go back and you'd compile your reports, and then you'd have to go and your pictures out, resize them and attach them to that one report. So it's the post-inspection administration work that is the biggest thing that I hear. It's time consuming, it's boring, and that's probably the biggest frustration that I hear. So the early customer feedback is the whole inspection process itself is made easier because they don't have to carry around a clipboard, they don't have to manually enter into the app. So the inspection process itself is easier. That's one tool in the environment. And then the second one, which is our remote work orders. And the remote work orders are really high impact because in the industry today, one thing that you hear a lot of across the board, customers, whoever you're talking to, is that there is a real scarcity these days of qualified engineers and technicians that are qualified to inspect. So you've got these senior guys that are there, but you've got fewer and fewer sort of, let's say, younger guys, younger people coming through that are actually fulfilling that role. And so as a result, big companies, whether it's rental companies or dealerships in particular, they might have field sales reps out in the field in front of the machines that need inspecting, but they may not necessarily be qualified mechanics or technicians to do those inspections. So what the remote work orders does, it enables the qualified techs to actually conduct an inspection remotely from the desk in their office and guide lesser experienced person around the machine or tell them what to focus on. So you're doing two things. You're actually coaching them in what needs to be looked at in the machine, but you're also guiding them around the machine and getting the exact report you want, because you're making the notes and you're taking the photos of what you want to take photos of from your desktop. And then at the end of it, on your desktop back in your office, you've got an inspection report already completed. So that's really, really high impact. And what that's solving is that's addressing the scarcity of qualified technicians in the industry. It means that if you do have a limited resource in your company where you have few technicians that are qualified to do the inspections, then you can actually have those guys handling more inspections in a day rather than them just going out individually, traveling and inspecting machines and coming back. You could actually cover different sites and different geographies in one day. So it's a huge time solving problem that we've sorted. And also it's obviously potentially massive in terms of cost savings. So that's very high impact. There are lots of really cool features, like, for example, you're a multi-branch dealership, Caterpillar or Komatsu, and you've got branches all over the place. Then you're actually able to create your branches inside the platform, then upload your assets for each branch into the platform, and then the inspection reports on all those assets, work orders. I want this machine needs to go and get repaired after that inspection, that sort of stuff. So this whole, what we call control tower oversight, is sitting in the platform, and it gives people like eyes over their entire operation, which is exciting. But if there's one feature in the platform that I personally really love, it would be the inspection template configuration tool, or tools, because there's more than one. So you can configure your template, customize your own template manually with all the fields, all the different types of fields. You can ask Inspeq AI, you can describe it, and you can ask it to build you a template for something just by describing it. Or what I personally love is you can take an existing inspection template form. It can be an actual inspection report that's been completed previously. You upload it into Inspeq AI, and it strips out the inputted data. It actually then scans the form, the sections, for example, general, brakes, boom, undercarriage, chassis, etc., engine. And then it will give you all of the fields that need to be inspected within each section. And then the really cool bit happens is when it then configures the form into an actual template with the right fields in the right place. So for example, inspection date, that would have a calendar drop down. in the field. And when you see that happening, it's wonderful, because it will take about 70 to 80 fields, will take Inspeq AI about a minute to map and configure. So it's not just copying and pasting something, it's actually configuring the app ready. And then when you press publish, that template, you've created that template, you then press publish, and then that is immediately launched into your platform, which is then launched into your Inspeq AI app ready for use, or your remote work orders app ready for use as well. So that, in terms of change management, how do I go from my old legacy system into this? That's a game changer. Don't be scared. Just crack on and do it. All you have to do is take your existing workflows, your existing templates, you'll get onboarded onto Inspeq, the platform, you'll upload your existing forms into the platform, everything gets mapped and configured for you. You then pick up the app to use it for the first time, or the remote work orders where you're doing that remote inspection piece. Everything will feel familiar, because that whole form that you've been used to doing is now just replicated, but in a new, faster, more efficient environment. And so it won't feel alien to you at all. So it will feel very comfortable, in fact.